I've bought myself an early Christmas present. So this has come from Max at EVA Resto's. It should hopefully be some adjustable spring plates, which is what we're going to be doing today. And partially assembled. They look really nice. Yeah, happy with those. Now in the kit you also get the, whoa! Oh. Because of the additional thickness of the actual spring plate, the adjustable part of it, you have to space it out slightly so that the cap goes on. So that's what they're for. Ooh, shiny new fixings. I do like nice shiny fixings. And I also bought the kit. It has a pair of short shocks to the back as well. So I don't want to be bouncing off the dampers if we can avoid it. Short shocks for the win. And although I'm not sponsored, a couple of stickers and a free advert for EVA Resto. So these are 2-inch lowered adjustable spring plates. So we've got a 2-inch drop on the end there where it's curved, and then an additional 4 inches, I believe, of adjustment on the adjuster. So in theory up to 6 inches from stock position if that's where we set it. I've kind of bought the full kit, so it comes with the bushes and everything. So hopefully we're pretty much ready to go to just a bolt on. So we're just going to finish unboxing what's left, and then we'll go and have a look at the floor pan and look at removing the original spring plates. The main focus of today's video is going to be the EVA Resto 2-inch pre-lowered with the angle on the end there, adjustable spring plates. However, if you want to lower your car the old school method, so keeping your original spring plates and turning them on the splines and refitting them, I'm also going to cover that in this same video. If you're ordering adjustable spring plates, you need to make sure you're ordering the correct ones. This is a late spring plate with the short noses on there, and that's for use with the short springs, the short torsion springs. However, if your spring plates look like this and they have a long nose on it, that's an early one, and that's for use with a longer spring. You're also going to need to know if your outer bush, which sits underneath the torsion spring cover, is round and smooth or knobbly. So there's 2 different types, round one and knobbly one. That I know of, there's 4 different torsion spring covers. Most of them use the round smooth bush. So if it's round, it's got a hole in the middle, so an early one, it's the round bush. If it's like this, obviously it's round. If it has 2 ears, that's also a round bush, so the knobbly one does not fit in there. Your knobbly bush fits with a knobbly spring plate cover with the 4 ears on. So I had to order these in from Cool Air quickly because say I ordered the wrong bush, but these arrived in 2 days, so great work guys, nice one. Right, let's get to work, let's do it. Okay, first thing we're going to do is release the axle from the spring plates. We've got the 3 big nuts and bolts here and the bump stop. Now your axle is actually adjustable on your spring plate, so behind these big nuts and bolts are slotted holes on the spring plate, which means if you to loosen them you can actually move your axle forwards or backwards. That's so you can alter the track and the towing on the rear wheels. Now if you're going to be reusing the same spring plates, you want to be taking these off and putting them back in the same place to avoid any tracking nightmares. So if you can see here, I've made a notch on the actual spring plate in line with the notch that's on the actual axle. To do that, I've got Mr. Lump Hammer and Mr. Chisel, and we just put a little divot in there. You could use a pen or something, but it'll probably get knocked or wiped off over if you're not careful. If, however, you're ordering adjustable spring plates from EVA, they already thought of it and it's pre-marked on the spring plate for you, which is really cool. Nice work, guys. So bump stops, if you're going to be lowering more than 1 inch or 2, you're going to run into trouble with it. So there's only 3.5 inches there between the car stop and the rubber stop. The spring plate at the minute is on its stop plate there. So when it's on the ground, normally it'd be under a little bit more tension and it'd be even closer, that gap. So if you're lowering by any amount, this is going to be a problem for you. Now they do just pull straight off, and you can just pull them off if you want to do that, and it leaves a little metal knobble. You could look at cutting it down. So a little bit tricky being rubber, but you can cut them down to half its height, or you can just remove the whole section completely, which is what I'm going to be doing. So the spring plates I've bought are 2-inch lowered already, and then I've got potentially 4 inches of adjustment, which is more than that on the adjuster. So for me, the bump stops have got to go. Bye bye bump stop. Got a huge collection of these if anybody wants one. The axle can be a little tight on the spring plate. You want to move it out of the way off the end there. Okay, spring plate cover bolts. These are 15s. These can be pretty tight in. Have to be in there. The original bolts look like that. So if you're going to be reusing them, you want to clean them all up, make sure they're nice and the threads are nice and clean. And probably copper the grease in them up before you reuse them. The EVA kit comes with some very sexy looking cap screws to replace these. So when we reassemble, we're going to be using those instead. So they're probably going to be held in place by the rubber. This is a torsion spring. So on the end of the torsion spring, you've got some splines and they differ side to side. So on the side which connects to your spring plate, so the outer splines, that's kind of fatter but narrower, and then on the inside it's wider but narrower. So the number of splines differ side to side, which means you can do fine adjustments by changing the spring plate on the outer and also modifying the splines on the inside. Now that's kind of a little bit more complicated. That's kind of like A-level stuff. If it's the first time you're doing this, generally you just want to take the spring plate off the outer end and turn it a spline or two to alter the height, and then pop the spring plate back on. Now the problem comes when you're taking the spring plate off. If the spring plate doesn't come off, instead if it sticks and you pull the inside out, you're going to lose your reference point. And if it's the first time you've done it, it's going to be pretty tricky getting it back in the same place. So I've taken a basic spirit level and drawn a plumb line straight through the centre of our spring. So by having a plumb line on here, it means I can pop it back in place, re-torque it back onto here, and by knowing that's plumb, I know that my central spline is in the same location. Normally you wouldn't have to do that, it's total overkill. So you might like to put some lines on here so you can see how many splines you've jumped by. So when we take the spring plate off the outer splines, you'll take it off, turn it a few turns, depending whether you're going up or down, and then you can pop it back on, and it's an easy way of seeing how many splines you've moved by. So when you've done it a few times, you kind of know how much it moves by anyway. But say if it's the first time you're doing this, definitely put some lines on. Now we need to jack our spring plate up just a little bit, so it's no longer on the stop here. If you've got your engine in, the body on, it's a lot easier to do this. Just get some form of jack, a scissor jack or something a bit more beefy. Pop it under your spring plate and you can lift it up. Just to do that, quite easy. If like this, it's a floor pan, there's no weight on here and it becomes a little bit more tricky. You might want to look at making a spring plate compressor tool. I made this in a previous video and I will link to that up above and in the description below. Super simple to make. However, I made a super beast compression tool which I'm going to be using today. And I shall be jacking my spring plate up just a little bit. Like so. So next we get our trusty wrecking bars, and we're just going to lever the spring plate out and off the end of the spring. Wiggly wiggly. So the spring plate's now out enough to get over the edge of the stop there, I think it is. So release the tension. I bought this floor pan as a floor pan, so I didn't know if it'd been modified at all in terms of its suspension and height. Now when you release the pressure and the tension off the spring plate and drop it in front of the stop, it'll intersect this bottom hole here, so it's just at the top of the bottom hole, if you can see there. And when it does that, it basically tells you that the spring plate is in its stock position. It's the stock suspension height, which is exactly what I would like it to be, because I want to replace the new spring plate in the same position as this one, so it's got the same amount of preload onto the stop. Come on, come on! Just gonna give it a tap. I feel like it's moving. So as I'm replacing like for like, just get my trusty white marker and just draw a line down here. Now the new spring plate might be slightly different in terms of width. I think it might be slightly narrower, but it won't be enough to cause any problems. Put a line across there. Because what we're going to check in for is the angle to make sure that the new spring plate stays parallel with those two lines once we take this one off. So if you're lowering the old-fashioned way, just kind of wiggle it off the spline, turn it a very slight amount, give it some pressure back on, and keep turning, and it'll pop onto the next spline. So each spline is approximately a couple of inches drop, so that'll be a 1 spline drop. A bit of pressure, pops back on again, 2 spline drop. But we're not doing that, we're removing guards and replacing it. So we're going to take it off completely. Now again, I'm just going to spend a bit of time cleaning all out in here. Make sure it's nice and clean before we put the new bushes in. I want the bushes to sit as far in and nicely as possible. With them being the urethane bushes I'm replacing with, they're quite tight. They tend to be quite stiff as well, so you need to make sure they're seated nicely. So nice and clean in there, and then we'll come straight back to you. Now it's all off, I'm just going to use a bit of wrist converter paint in there, make sure it's nice and clean. I'm trying this one out, Anaconda's rust converter. I'll let you know how that gets on, possibly in a future video. While the paint's drying, I'm just running an M10 tap through all the threads, make sure they're nice and clean. So they're a bit rusty, and I'd also been painting around them as well. There's bits of paint in some of them. So just make sure they're nice and clean. It's an M10 with a 1.5 thread on it. Just want to make sure the splines on the end of your spring are nice and clear, free from dirt. Otherwise the new plates can be quite tight to fit. So we're going to take the inner one off now. I'm going to fit it in the car. But first, before we do that, we have to grease it up. As these are urethane bushes, we're greasing them with red rubber grease, which for some reason it makes me happy that it's red. I don't know why. But red grease for the win. So I'm going to put plenty of grease on the insides where it might be binding. I'm going to lightly grease the outside edges as well. If you're installing rubber, the original style rubber bushes back in, they should be installed dry. So you shouldn't really be greasing those up. In theory, they shouldn't squeak or make a noise. I do believe you can use graphite or carbon dust as like a dry lubricant if you're having noises, but as I understand it, they should always be installed not greasy, at least. Whoa, don't drop it! Nearly. Pop them in there. Using our white guidelines, we're going to fit our new spring plate. So it must be parallel to those lines. So get down low and have a look. There she blows. Use soft mallet, give it a whack. When using urethane bushes like this instead of the traditional rubber style, I find it harder to get the spring plate further on at this point. So I think it's because the bush that's behind there is a lot harder, and it's just, say, tricky to get it into place. So the spring plate's well and truly on the stop, so I'm not concerned about that. We've got about another 5 mil or so to go with the spring plate. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to grease up the outer bush, and I'm going to pop it on there, and then we're going to use the cap to pull it all together. So it just needs to go in a little bit further. The problem is when you put the horseshoe and the new cap on, and I've checked the cap pressing is correct, which it is, you struggle to get the bolts through. So what I'm having to do is I'm having to put the bolts through kind of at distance and copper grease up all the new fixings. So now I'm just going to carefully clamp everything down. I work in diagonals, and all being well, it should pull everything into line. I've been struggling to find a definitive answer for the bolts to hold your torsion covers on. I did check, however, with EVA regarding their new cap screws, and it's recommended they're torqued up to 60 Newton meters or 44 foot-pounds. So at the front here, everything's seated nicely. There's no gaps. Everything looks like it's in the right place, which is awesome. And then at the back here, we've attached our spring plate to the swing axle, to the axle tube using our brand new fixings. Now, I've not nipped these down because I want to paint everything first before I clamp everything down. Obviously, you want to line up your axle tube notch there with the notch on the spring plate. And then nip it all down, and then once it's on the ground and you've got the wheels on and the car's under its own weight, so it's all under tension, then you want to torque them up. So it's supposed to be torqued up while it's under tension on the ground, and I think on a swing axle bug like this it's 72 foot-pounds and an IRS is 80 foot-pounds, but please double check. Hopefully that helps, guys. Take care. Bye bye.